Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Centerville Grace podcast, where every single week we do our very best to help you, our church family, dive deeper into the weekly word. I'm here with the whole ensemble in a brand new space.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
New space.
New space.
This is like our fifth one.
Well, it's a good problem. Well, we keep renovating rooms. We keep getting pushed out of places, and we're just running out of places to hide in the corner.
And truthfully, one of our goals for this year is to do more storytelling.
Yep.
And so finding dedicated spaces where we can put the backdrop, where we can put the lights in and tell stories in a really good way is really important to all of us. So thank you for your podcast patience. And now let's jump into the week in review. What you got for us, Dave Holmes?
Hey, man, what a Sunday. That was fantastic.
It was.
What a Sunday. That was better than I thought it was going to be. Like, as far as expectations, as far as how many people show up and just the quality, I just thought it was really good.
What number are you putting on it?
It was like maybe 3/4 of that stadium was full, right? I don't know.
We have an official number, but I'll let you guys
Do we
guess
have an
on it
official
first.
number?
We do.
1,500.
Oh, your waist. It was, I think it's probably 4,392.
Whoa. Okay.
The correct was just under 4,500.
I was way off, man.
So the difference is I know that the
Samsonite.
stadium.
I was way off.
That's why you don't count attendance on Sunday morning.
That's
We do
right.
it.
It's not my.
And I know
my
that the
forte.
stadium. I know that the stadium holds 8,000.
Oh, okay. I didn't. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Between both sides,
I didn't
or
want to.
just on the home side.
just on the home side.
Oh wow.
To be fair,
Oh.
I didn't want to like give a great high number, and then it's like, oh no, it was only.
Somebody asked me how it went, and I was like, "Oh, it's probably close to 7,000." No, I'm just kidding.
No. Yeah. So hey, 4,000. Wow, that's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So that was your highlight.
That was great. Yeah. Beth and I got to sit together with the boys, and it was great.
And that never happens.
I know. And we brought a neighbor. Ezra invited one of his friends from the neighborhood. Never been to
Dang.
church before.
Wow.
So as
That's
far as I
awesome.
know, yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't get your hopes up. It's not like this every week, but
Well, we warned him like this is going to be a little
A
different.
little
So,
different. It was really warm.
It was
Ooh.
so
but it
warm.
was warm.
never felt closer to heaven and closer to hell at the same time.
Oh man,
From the heat, not
from
from,
the
anything
heat,
else. Just
sure.
the heat.
Right,
just the
right.
heat.
Mm-hmm.
the drops of sweat were coming. Yeah,
Oh, for sure.
yeah. And if I sweat, it's hot because I don't normally sweat.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's-
that's
it
not
was-
true for the other two people.
Nope,
at
I'm
this table.
sweating right now. Look at me. I'm already sweating.
I have a condition. That's okay.
well,
Dust.
Don't we all?
Highlight from last week.
I mean, well, he stole mine. I mean, that was going to be mine. No, it was a super fantastic time. I'd say all of Sunday was really good. We had I think 8 core churches that were kind of participating with us. Then we also had some other churches and people that just kind of stumbled in.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. Thought the speaker did a great job. Kurt Kirkland came in and talked a little about some of the work that he's doing down in Cincinnati as the Reds chaplain, and also talked a little about the Buckeyes thing, which I thought was another cool highlight of the week in general. What was happening on Ohio State's campus, man. And just the fact that the gospel is going to go out to everybody, especially if they win the national championship, which, maybe they will. I don't know.
If
First
it
game
wasn't
was
clear,
over.
God is on our side. Now we know.
Favorable.
Now we know.
Favorable.
Favorable odds.
Yes.
Yep.
The conditions for this is favorable.
But for those who missed what Kirk Kirkland said, he was talking about how half the team was like in on chapels,
a leadership
and leadership retreat,
a leadership
and-
retreat for a student ministry movement.
Yeah.
And what happened last week, if you're unaware, a bunch of these Ohio State Buckeye football players actually led a revival on campus.
Mm.
And
Wow.
I think they said 20 some odd people. Do you remember the number?
I can't remember the number, but it was significant.
A significant number of people were baptized. They were proclaiming the gospel in the middle of the square. This was all happened outdoors at night, led by football players. If you're on social media, I recommend following Cam Babb, Kamm Babb, Babb. He was a former Block O wearer. If you're a Ohio State football person,
Awesome
you
guy.
know all about that.
Yeah.
Great guy, right? And Cam was part of that leadership team. And I've been following Cam for years. He had a massive knee surgery and then came back and really was part of that planting a foundation. And I'm just more and more impressed that this football team is just so in depth in love with the Lord.
Yeah.
At least a large group of them.
Right.
Yeah, and he said during that 2 weeks, he said that we didn't talk about football like at all. We talked about Jesus,
Yeah.
that's something.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Another reminder how sports, we kind of get on sports once in a while for
Right.
taking over, but how sports can be such a vehicle for bringing the gospel to an unreached people. And that's just another reminder. I was just talking to Corwin Anthony, who we support here at Centerville Grace. He works for Athletes in Action, and he was sharing with me their role, Athletes in Action, at the Olympics. You wouldn't think they would be, but how, man, they're getting Bibles to people who would normally never have access to Bibles, have an opportunity because they're in, France, and all of a sudden for the Olympics, and now they're hearing the gospel message for the first time. So just powerful ways the sports world can open doors. So
that's actually a great transition to my highlight of the week. I had the opportunity to serve a family who I coached in basketball, and was able to do a funeral for a family member that passed away, kind of unfortunately, or not. Early is what I mean, like tragically almost, right? It was cancer, and he was in his 50s, and his son and my son played on a team that I was able to help be a part of coaching. And so again, that connection for sports and the gospel for me, I love that intersection, and I love the way that God uses it. So I'm super thankful that we were able to do that at Centerville High School Stadium.
Yeah.
And I was really thankful to be a part of that family's celebration of life for their dad. So it's good stuff. It's a crazy week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know what? One of the guys that I disciple said, he was like, listening to Kirk Kirkland, who gave the message, and he was like, he started off and he went to Luke 15.
Hey,
of all places. Come on, Kirk.
I was like,
he knew. Do you think he knew? I think he knew.
I think he's following the podcast.
I immediately leaned over to Caleb, my son, and was like, he stole my message. So this worked out perfectly because we didn't really get to go over Luke 15.
No.
And now Pastor Kirk went over at Luke 15. We went over at Luke 15. It's kind of where we are in the process. Yeah. So today we are going to go deeper dive into Luke 15, the story of the lost. Dave, you want to read it for us?
You want me to read the whole thing, or just it's a lot?
Maybe
it's
just
a lot.
Why don't you give us the Dave's Reader Digest first?
Yeah, let's just talk about the three parables real quick. One has to deal with the lost sheep, where the shepherd leaves the 99 to go find the one, and Jesus's focus again is the rejoicing part. When he finds the sheep, he rejoices and brings it home. The second parable has to deal with a woman who lost a precious coin. She does everything she can to find it, and when she does find it, she rejoices in the same way God rejoices over those who repent. And then the third and final parable, which is not really the final parable, Jesus continues on with the shrewd manager, but of this series, is dealing with probably the most famous of all parables. Is the parable is what we know as the prodigal son story, where the father has two boys, and the younger son asks for his inheritance early, and the father gives it to him. The son leaves, squanders everything, winds up in a famine, and nobody's there to feed him and take care of him. He's hanging out with pigs, which was so unheard of for a Jewish young man to do. And then he comes to his senses. He realizes what he's done. He goes back. He repents to his father. His father kind of cuts him off in the whole "I'm sorry," and he just embraces him, loves him, forgives him. I was thinking about, by the way, the father doesn't say "I told you so." What the father says is, "I love you so."
Wow.
That's what I thought about when Kirk Kirkland was talking. I was like, yeah, that's what the father did. Like, yeah. So anyways, he brings the son back in, but that's not the end of the story, actually, because the older son is jealous and upset that the father would love his younger son to this point and be so gracious and kind. And the father says, "What else am I to do? This is my son. He's returned." And it kind of leaves it open-ended, which is another great way of just telling the story. I love Jesus as the storyteller. He plays off our imaginations so much. And so that's where we're at.
Dust, when you think about these three stories, what are some of the things that immediately come to your mind? It's obviously Jesus being super intentional here with it's pretty rare that he would tell three stories with kind of the same, purpose.
Yeah.
What do you think about this chapter and kind of when you dive into all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's really it's a piece on love, right? How much does Jesus love us that he would, leave 99 to chase the one? We're the one. And, that's just amazing how God loves us so much. So I think for anybody that's listening, if you think, hey, am I too far gone? I haven't done, like, say you've got two neighbors next to each other. This is my own parable in my own words, right? And you've got one neighbor that goes to Centerville Grace Church every week and is in disciple-making relationships and doing all the right things. You've got another neighbor that
you could call that person a Gracie.
A Gracie. I could. I was going to call him Tim, but that's for no reason. I just made the word up. A Gracie. We'll tell you more about that later.
That's a tease.
That's a tease. Yes. And then you've got another neighbor who maybe they came to church 20 years ago and then they've been off living a life of debauchery, and then they come back. Okay, who does God love more out of those two? The answer is yes. It's so, I think there's some righteous jealousy in that, like, especially when you look at the two brothers parable, the jealousy of like, I've done the right thing for so long. I have, fought the good fight. I've raced the race. And here this guy has gotten to do whatever he wanted. And then just because he came back, you're just as happy with him as you are with me. It's like, yeah. And I think that should make us equally uncomfortable, but equally grateful to who the character of God is.
Dave, same question to you. When you think about these three stories, what are some things that pop into your head?
I think it's just Jesus is so emphatic on this point that he spends three parables back to back to back, emphasizing just where the hearts of the Pharisees were at versus what Jesus's whole mission was all about. And there's so many different things I want to talk about with this. That's where I'm like, because you have the loss factor, you have reaching those who are far from God, but I just love the stories. Jesus is such a master storyteller.
So good.
I mean, I would love to geek out on 30 minutes of just how good the parable of the lost son is, just in just so many different ways. So we can get into that. We can get into just the nature of evangelism, but it's so good. So good.
One of the things that always strikes me about this, or that struck me about this particular time in studying it, is that how much celebration happens in each parable.
Yeah.
I think sometimes that I know that Jesus pursues the lost. I know that we see that in there, but also the amount of rejoicing that happens when the lost are found, whether that be the sheep, whether that be the money, or whether that be the son. It just reminds me of the joyful nature of who God is. And I think if there's a part of my walk with the Lord that I could remember more, it's how joyful he is in the midst of because this is hard work. Like going after the one is hard work. Yes. Right. Like the father going out to the sons is hard work. Like this kind of relational work, searching the lost is hard. And so I think that the joy when the lost are found just seems really relevant to me this particular time.
Yeah. I think this is probably one of the keys to why churches are a lot less joyful than what they could be or should be. It's because they're not reaching lost people. They're not actively seeing lives transformed and the hopeless lost becoming happily found. They're not seeing that. So, if you really want joy, I think this is one of the ways you get it.
I've never thought about it as being prescriptive. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Okay.
I look at it that way in some ways. I'm like, listen, where do we find joy in this broken, sin-filled world? It's when we see people who are far from God wake up and realize I need Jesus. And what greater joy is there? What greater joy does have someone's eternity be changed in a flash of an eye? I can't think of any. Can you? What's better than that?
No, I got
nothing.
Right?
I mean, I don't,
Any thought I had was really just be a sarcastic response. And I was really trying so hard not to ruin the moment. I was like, Bengals win the Super Bowl. Right.
It'd be great. That'd be,
But it's not the same level of joy.
No, totally not, right? And to see your son or your daughter come to faith. I mean, what greater joy as a parent? So, if we were missing out on joy, to me, this is like one of those checks in my heart. I'm like, if I'm not feeling joyful, I'm not rejoicing, well, how often are you going out to search for the lost? How much time are you putting into that? So
that's good.
Yeah.
Tess, when you think about the parable of the lost son, obviously that's kind of out of the three, it's the one that's got the most meat on it. It's got some really interesting character development. So let's kind of spend the rest of our time focusing on that part of chapter 15. What do you think about the most when you think about the parable of the lost son?
I think about who I associate more with in my own life, to be honest with you.
So this is a great question. Who's the main? Who do you think is the main? Person in this? The younger son, the older son, the father. Who is the main character?
Who do you think the main character is?
I asked you first.
That's true.
No. This is the beauty of Jesus. I mean, depending on who you are,
right?
Depending on where you are in your life, the main character changes, right?
Yeah. So for church folk who have been in the faith for a long time, then, I think clearly we associate ourselves with the one who's watching the other son go out and get lost and come back.
Yeah.
And we take that more, maybe jealous approach. Maybe if you have just found Jesus more recently in your life, you associate more of your life with being that lost son. And, there's probably, like you said earlier, I think there's probably more joy in that one than the other one.
Yeah.
Right. And I just want to reiterate that same point, man. If we're not seeing enough joy in our churches, maybe we're hanging out with too many of the same people like us that have lost our fervor for seeing how God actually transforms us.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, ministries that are really exciting and honest, typically we could go down the list of we talk about like Celebrate Recovery Ministries and things like that, things that really where we see Jesus meet people where they are down in the ditch, and then you see the massive transformation as they move away from that and find the love of God, and they find community, and they find accountability, and they find purpose again. And man, you want to worship with an awesome crowd, get into services like that, and I promise you it's way more exciting than anything that happens on most Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
That's not a statement on our churches, it's just a statement of that's how celebration really works. When you see somebody go from the depths of despair into the love and hope of Jesus, we should be absolutely full of joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is the first year where I was most convicted that I've ever preached this, that I was most convicted by the Father's position. And I wouldn't say that I saw myself in the Father as much as I wanted to be like the Father.
Yes.
Right. And so I've been in vocational ministry for almost 20 years, and there's not a year that's gone by that we haven't talked about the parable of the lost son. It's a big one, right? And normally I kind of vacillate between the two brothers and when I read it and pray about it. But this year, this was the question that I wrestled with internally after I read it this year. What am I doing to go meet the people? What am I doing to go meet the son who's out on the road? What am I doing to go talk to the son who doesn't want to come back in? The father never, this is what struck me. The father never gives up on celebrating with the whole family.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oof. Right. It's just there's oof. It's one of those convicting moments in the faith where it's like, what am I doing? What am I doing for the older brother specifically was the one, right? And because most of the people that I'm pursuing, I have a fair amount of non-Christians in my life, so I know some of that group, but the other group, I'm like, what am I doing to pursue them?
Yeah, it's good because the Father loves them equally, right?
Yes.
He's yeah.
Who about you?
Who about me?
Well said.
Words are hard.
Who about you?
Words are hard. Who do I relate to the most? Goodness,
this
on
particular
the day.
season. Maybe just today if you want.
Yeah, I would say, goodness, the Father. I was thinking of the Father during Kirk Kirkland's talk. Being a dad now, right? That kind of changes. You take on that fatherly perspective a little bit more, and just the willingness to be gracious and kind and so generous. And again, like I said, he doesn't say I would be so there with my child saying, I told you so. I see, this is why you need to listen to your dad. Dad knows, because I've said this probably 1,000 times in my lifetime already, but he didn't say I told you so. He just simply said, I love you so, in so many words. So that was big for me. That was the profound Sunday morning. So, yep.
When you guys think about this story and you think about the idea that the father says to the older son, you're with me every day, you have access to all that I have every day.
Yeah.
Talk me through some of your feelings around this idea that how do you prevent yourself from taking that position of the older brother? Like, how do you stay grateful for what we have with the Father every day?
I feel like you have to have some kind of practice in your life that reminds you of the reality of the joy of living with God, even when it becomes, maybe in seasons, maybe when you're in a dry season, or you haven't seen God move the same way in this season as maybe he met you in other places. So, what's that deep relational intimacy look like with God, and what are we doing to make sure that we're always reminding ourselves that we should never reach a place of entitlement? Because I think we become, in a holy way, maybe wholly entitled, entitled in a holy way, right? I don't know.
Self-righteous is the word that came to mind as you were describing wholly entitled.
Wholly entitled, WH or just HOLY, wholly entitled. That's the one I was going for. Yes. But like, when we've walked with, if we've walked with the Lord for a long time, it's really easy to take things for granted. Mm-hmm. It's really easy for things that were once joy-filled to become routine. And sometimes, I think even as pastors, right, sometimes it's stuff in the church that's like, oh, that's amazing. I mean, I've seen this happen before numerous times. So even amazing things can start to become routine unless we're constantly renewing our mind and renewing our relationship with God daily, and making sure that we're always grateful for what God is providing for us, and for us, what he allows us to do and be a part of.
Reverend.
I have so much Tim Keller in my head in this Prodigal. Have you guys read Prodigal God and listened to a lot of Tim Keller stuff on? So I have a lot of Tim Keller.
But Kirk did quote him on Sunday.
He did, yeah. I mean, he has so much to say on this. But the older son and the younger son are not so different. They're not so different. They just go about. They want the same. They want the father's stuff. They want the father's possessions. And they just go about it in two different ways. One just straight up says, I wish you were dead, kind of thing. Just give me your stuff now. And the other one says, I'll just work for you. I'll just try to be good, and I'll try to just do good and try to please you. And then I'll get my stuff. So they're not far apart as much as we think. And I think we need to see, if we're the older son, we need to see the younger son in us as well. There is that piece of it. Right. We just go about it a different way. We both just have a heart that we both have a heart that's not longing just to be with dad, to love the father. We want the father's things. So, that's what I think.
I was reading Carlos Whitaker's new book recently, and he talked about this idea about the word behold. Mm-hmm. And this idea that, behold, this is the Lamb of God who takes away, this idea about like this, it's kind of like an awe I see. And so I've just kind of been playing around a little bit with that word behold and what that means and what that looks like. And I think that being beholden to who God is one of the ways that we can really fight that temptation to be kind of ambivalent about what God is doing in there. And, this Sunday is a great example. I mean, if I was true, honest confession, I was not really looking forward to Sunday morning prior to Sunday morning. There's just a lot of people. I knew it was going to be hot. I've gone to enough JV games there to know that the sun is going to be baking, right? Typically there's always sound problems, which there were.
Yeah, what was up with that?
The generator
generator blew a fuse.
Yep. Is that what it was? Okay.
Pushed too much amperage to it, pushed the volume a little too much, and pop.
Man.
And so like I was like, this is going to be cute, but it's not really like, it's not super transformational. That was if I can just be honest, that was the resentment that I had walking in. And I felt like during worship, as I was sitting next to my son, and then my daughter and her girlfriend were there, who stayed the night. And then one of my son's other basketball player friends was staying, like all of a sudden these people who we never get to worship with were worshiping with. And I was like, like it was both convicting and like, behold, this is the church, right? Like it was like, whew. So I think that's one of the ways that I try to fight it sometimes.
Yeah. Yep. It's good.
When you guys lean into a parable like this, and there's this idea about the party at the end, and how what's interesting to me about this story, specifically around the party, is that the younger brother doesn't come out with the father to go get the older brother. Like, the family dynamics here are jacked
messed up,
man. What are your thoughts around this idea about the celebration and the party and that kind of family dynamic connection?
Yeah, I can't help but think of church world. That's where I always go to when I think of this passage and a lot of other passages, because I'm a pastor and I think about churches, and I think about how so often when pastors and churches try to reach people, there's stones being thrown at them often. So I just think, wow, we just have so many, I think, people who, and I'm not saying our church specifically, just in the church generally, that there are people who just don't get what we're supposed to be doing here on earth. I think they just lost sight of the mission, or never had been really given the mission. And we just want to form these holy huddles, as we call them, and we just want to be safe, and we want to, just read our Bibles, sing, pray, and just be together, right? Or even alone. But we're not on mission at all. And I think if we really have the heart of the Father, we have to stay on mission. And we tend to lean in, or move, or not lean in. We tend to turn in, and we need to be outward facing always. And when I read this story, when the son is refusing to go in to celebrate, I'm like, how hard-hearted is this young or older brother to not even go in, at least to say, hey, I'm glad you're back, or hey, I'm glad you're not dead, or, hey, just, hey, nothing. He just refuses to go in. He's on the outside looking in. He's on the outside. Now he becomes the outsider, right? So I don't ever want to be the outsider because I wasn't willing to go in. Yeah.
That's good. That's closing thoughts about the parable.
Yeah, man. I think that I'm going to go back to Dave's first point, man. That should absolutely draw us to be more celebratory, to pursue people with a greater sense of fervor, to get more excited. Like, say we do a baptism service and we're seeing somebody who's taken a step of faith and they want to proclaim this publicly, and like, we're, oh, that's great. Yay, good. They did it, and it's like, man, where's the party? Like, like, I don't know, man. The older I get, the more and more I find myself just so over. I have to say this very carefully. So over controlled church. Okay, where everything is measured and everything is, hey, we can get a little bit excited, but not too excited because people will think we're weird, and and willing to take risks, right? Willing to take risks for the gospel, willing to offend people for the right reasons, right? Offend people with how joy-filled we are that somebody who had absolutely no business being anywhere near the court of God or God's people had come to faith, or that we made them feel welcome enough to even step through the door. And like, that's just where I want to be. That's where I want to live, man. I want to live. I find myself sometimes associating with the older brother, or the brother who, did all the right things. And it's like, oh, he gets all that. Like, I had to work for it. They didn't do anything. They got to go out and do their stuff and came back, and they're still getting all the same stuff I got. Like, I'd probably be in his position too. Like, that's not fair at all, Yeah. But that's the reality is, man, we are all completely unworthy of God's grace in our lives. No matter how long we follow God, no matter how much we think we're following his will, we are all equally unworthy. And therefore, man, let's all be equally joyful whenever anybody comes to faith.
I love that. All right, guys. PRs for the week, pastoral recommendations. Every single week we try to give you, our church family, something to take home with you. Do you got one? You want me to go first? What do you got?
Yeah, if you want to geek out on the prodigal son story a little bit more, I got a book for you. It's called What Do They Hear? And it's called Bridging the Gap Between Pulpit and Pew by Mark Allen Powell. And what he does in this is he looks at the prodigal son story, among other things, but chapter 2, he specifically does the prodigal son story. It's not a long book. And he looks at it from different cultures and civilization, like different cultures and how they would view it, and what stands out to them in particular. And it's just so fascinating. Like when you read it from an African culture, the African culture was like, and nobody fed him. Like, we don't even remember that's part of the story, right? And they're like, how, that's like in a community, very communal type culture, nobody took him, nobody was willing to feed him. And so just very fascinating. If you want to do a little deeper dive into the prodigal son story and how it can be read and how different applications can be pulled from it, it's really good.
I think for me, one of the things that I would give as a PR this week is to find a stream of non-Christians, right? That's our friend Justin talks about a stream of non-Christians all the time. Like, who are the people in your life that don't go to church that you hang out with? I think it's important as we just kind of lean into finding the lost, that we have places and spaces where we hang out. Maybe it's at a football stadium, maybe it's on the golf course, maybe it's anywhere that there are non-Christians there so that we can find that prescriptive joy.
Yeah, you stole mine right out of my mouth, so thank you for that.
Yes.
But
I knew I should go second. I knew it. I was like, I should
every
go
time.
second.
Well,
Every
I feel
time.
bad. I kind of nerded out. I'm like, that wasn't even applicable for reaching lost people, but
It'll help.
It's applicable for something.
But no, really, I want people to see the heart of Jesus, and it's all about people. Like, it's just all about people. There's nothing else you can take with you in life. It's this
people.
or nothing,
Right.
So, anyways.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'll reiterate that as a PR, that, make your Christian faith not about you. I was thinking through just in my head of, how much we don't live missionally because we start to assume that faith is really for us. It's to save us, to make sure that we know Jesus. And I was thinking of you guys remember that old hymn? It was In the Garden. You remember that one?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that one's got some real bad theology in it, guys.
I don't know that one.
Oh, you don't know that one.
I'm
Listen,
not sure.
You should have grown up in the Baptist church.
You want to sing it?
Hey, no, not really.
I think
words-
I've heard people use it at funerals.
Yeah, it's big at funerals, but the words to that hymn were, and he walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am his own and joy we share, Yep. So, and everything is like, we've kind of subtly developed this me-centered theology where everything Jesus did was for me. When he was on the cross, he had me on his mind.
That's the worst song.
I know.
Like a rose.
That's,
oh,
geez. So many youth groups. Yes. And it's so, and it doesn't make that incorrect, but it skews the perspective. The perspective is we are here to live on mission for the kingdom of God. And yes, God desires, just as, he desired the lost son to come back. God desires you to find him, but not just to save yourself, but to fulfill the purpose that Jesus has for you, which is to be on mission for the kingdom.
Yeah.
So that's my PR. Just keep it in perspective.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, friends, that's our podcast for today. As always, we do our very best to help you, our church family, dive a little deeper into the message so that no one walks alone. So thankful for each and every one of you, and we'll catch you next week as we continue on in the Gospel of Luke.